Hi, everyone. This is Lorraine, and I wanted to do another Facebook Live today. At the beginning of this year, I started doing full moon transmissions. I'd actually been doing them for quite some time, and I started making it available for people to be able to utilize the energies of the full moon that are so powerful, to be able to release patterns and programs and to focus on a vision and to create opportunities for healing. And for those of you who may not know, I channel energy directly from God's heart. And so the energy is very, very potent. It's conscious, it's intelligent, it's alive, and it always meets people exactly where they are. So in this last full moon, which was also on the equinox, and doing the live transmission with a group on Zoom, it was kind of like a trifecta, because the energy transmission amplifies whatever it is that we intend for that experience, especially during these very powerful portals. And so I always invite people afterwards, because I love getting the feedback of people's experiences each time they receive the transmissions, because, every person's experience is different. And while many of the people who join me on these transmissions have been receiving them for over a year and had incredible experiences with their health, every time it's always whatever is ready to be released at that time. And so I started getting some of the feedback from people, and I noticed that there was a theme with a couple of people, and that's what I want to talk about today. And the theme had to do with anger. So what I found really interesting, and I like to refer to this, is that sometimes when we're being triggered by something, and it could be something that's very random, many times when we're doing something intentionally, like a full moon transmission, and something comes up the following day, because the last place that we release is physically. And sometimes we don't always see the relationship between something that's coming up for us physically, emotionally, something that may come up in our life as potentially being related to what's going on energetically, or a healing session or transmission that we've been working with. And I think that it can be very helpful when we can begin to see that relationship, because our mind is always trying to make sense out of things. And many times when it doesn't quite make sense, or seems to be something that's unrelated, we can get into the habit of blaming a situation or a person or a transmission for something that's coming up that's actually revealing what's beneath the surface of what that healing has assisted you to release. So one of the women came to me, and in many instances after a transmission, she's in a really good place. She calls our happy bubble, and she's come back many times talking about how she's felt much more relief with some of the physical pain that she deals with. Her bloods for the last 14 months have been incredible. Her doctor is really, really thrilled. So she came back and she said, I've been in my happy bubble for a couple of days, and now I am feeling all of these feelings of anger and impatience. And she works with, she's a caregiver for her mother, who is, from how she's described, can be a very difficult personality. And so as she was talking about what was coming up for her, I found it really interesting, and I have encouraged her many times to look at how she is expressing herself. So anger many times can be an indication of really inviting us to look beyond the initial symptom or the initial reaction, because we can become so programmed to become very narrow focused in what comes up. And I'm always inviting people, because of the mind-body work that I do, to expand the picture and to go into that place of curiosity as to what your body is trying to tell you, what a symptom is trying to tell you, what your emotions are trying to tell you, what your behavior is trying to tell you, what life is trying to tell you in all these different ways, and sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's in the form of a metaphor, and we need a little bit of decoding. But what I also find is so important is when you're in this place of inquiry, you can get a lot of answers that, of course, our minds can't answer, but our heart knows. So initially, I invited her to look at where do you need to give more voice? Where might you need to be setting some boundaries? And also to look at how during the course of her life, especially with her mother, who is a great trigger for her, really helping her in so many ways, even though it's not always comfortable, the people who are in service to us. And I believe that the people who push our buttons are in service and help us to learn so much about ourselves, even if some of the ways that it plays out is not always the most fun, and it doesn't always work out in a way that is resolved peacefully. So she began to, I think, start to ask herself some of these questions. And as she's been expressing herself more, she came back with this really brilliant question. And she said, do you think that it's possible, because of all of the anger and annoyance, these are my words, and the frustration and the not feeling appreciated, I'm using these words because these are just things that I know about her, that her energies that she's been holding on to, that she has not been expressing, have been projected onto her mother, and her mother is actually reacting to the energies that she's been holding on to. Well, what a brilliant question, because of course, if you've ever walked into a room where there's been tension, you know that the energy is there, even if perhaps nobody has expressed anything, because we're energy beings. And even if we don't give voice to it, we are throwing energy off. You know, it's people feel our energy before we open our mouth. And so since this has been a very difficult relationship for her, yes, it's very possible that her mother is reacting to the energy that she has been holding on to. And then when she expresses, then there's a greater argument. And so it becomes very cyclical. So I invited her to really pay attention to that and see if she could come back into that place of compassion or come back into her observer and just notice what may change in her relationship. And I'm really curious to hear any feedback that she has, because I know that when suggestions are put out to her, she's excited to kind of try them out. So a second thing that came up with one of the women who's also been working with the transmissions is she had said, I guess it was about 24 hours after the full moon transmission, and she said that she had gotten up in the morning and she deals with a lot of physical pain. And she said that she felt a lot of muscular pain in her joints as well, and that it felt very, very severe. And we've talked about some different things over time in terms of holding on to certain emotions and thoughts. And we know that it has an impact on our bodies because of the fact that if energy is not moving out of our body, it has to go somewhere. So it can go in the form of a chronic pain, or in digestive issues, or create the breeding ground for illnesses such as cancer. And so it's really important to pay attention to that mind-body connection, something that Louise Hay discovered many, many years ago, and something I always look at when I'm working with people with health conditions or any kind of emotional and mental blocks. I always look at the synergy between the mind-body connection, because there's a wealth of information there that's all interrelated, and when you can see how some of that tapestry comes together, you can really work with it. So one of the things that she said to me, I guess it was maybe 2 days after that, because things don't always come up immediately. Sometimes there's this period of integration that we need while we're still processing. And of course, directly after the full moon and equinox, the energy, even though it's not peaking, it's still at a lower intensity, it's still flowing, and we as energy beings are still feeling so much energy that's happening. The planetary influences, there's so much happening with us. So it's helpful when we can begin to observe and understand and not be at the mercy of what we're experiencing, that's where the awareness and the knowing can become a very powerful resource for us. So she came back and said, I'm feeling all of this anger, and I'm not used to feeling this anger. And I think that she said, because I don't have it directly in front of me, that she was feeling vulnerable and upset because she was feeling really angry. And she said she was feeling anger for the first time. I got so excited because this is also somebody that I've been working with for a while, somebody who has had difficulty setting boundaries, has, I think, been a little too nice, and oftentimes people have taken advantage of her. And I suspect that she is the kind of person who has really kept so much to herself and been very quiet. And so here's this anger that's starting to bubble up, which I thought was just fantastic. And I'm waving at you as well because the person I'm talking about knows I'm talking about her, because I really got so excited. And what I said was, this is phenomenal, because this anger is starting to come up because it's been in your body for so long. And when we start to get in touch with some of these feelings, and they can be very uncomfortable, anger, when it's at its most volatile, we know how destructive that can be when you look at some of the things that are happening in the world. And so our own anger can be frightening for us because we can feel out of control. We don't know what we might do, and it's easier to self-direct our anger if that's been the way in which anger has been managed, not always welcome in our society. And so when it starts to bubble up, it can be very, very volatile and can manifest in a lot of illness or in addictions and more physical pain and all the different things that I've been mentioning in terms of illness and suffering and blocks. So I invited her to really embrace her anger and to create space, to give it a voice, to maybe do some writing with it, to do something physical to move the energy. But rather than to see it as a negative, I applauded her, because I think that if she will create the space to allow this energy that has probably been pushed down for decades to begin to surface in more productive and constructive ways, I think that she is going to start to feel a difference in her body where she may feel less physical pain. That's what I'm curious about, and this is what I've seen with a lot of people, is that when you begin to get to the source of what may be perpetuating a physical symptoms, there has to be a shift in the body. What I would also say is, for people who need to express their anger, one of the most positive ways that we can work with that after we have allowed it to have its space, not to shut it down too fast, is it can become a source of force and passion, where we can use that for courage, where we can use that perhaps to be more of an activist, to show up in the world in so many productive ways, because we're honoring a part of ourselves that needs to express. And there's ways that it can come out very positively, but when we suppress anything that has been suppressed by others or has been judged, it has to, if it has no exit point, it has to manifest in some ways, and many times it manifests in our body in the form of illness and life struggles. So this, we're living at incredible times of being able to move energy in very powerful, very productive, very healing and loving ways that can start to bring our life into a greater state of balance and self-love, and be a model for people who are going through some of these roller coasters. And, we teach what we most need to learn, and as things are coming up, I trust these transmissions. I trust the brilliance of them. I don't have anything to do with what's going to happen with each person's experience, because I know that when I step aside and allow that divine loving presence to come through, it knows what we need. And sometimes we just need somebody to help us navigate these experiences when we don't understand what's happening, so that we can use the energy in ways that support us in moving forward in loving and healthy ways. So I invite you to take advantage. I still have the replay of the full moon equinox transmission available. If you're at a place where you'd like to create some breakthroughs for yourself, the energy is embedded in the replay, and you can go onto my website, lorrainecohen.com/full moon. And I welcome you to share this this audio with others, this video with others. If things that I've said has resonated, I would love to hear any comments that you have, if you have any questions. And I do these full moon transmissions every month. I never know what's going to come up in terms of what that person needs. But it's such an exciting time to be alive, where we can utilize so many different resources to begin to move through some of these patterns and free ourselves, because that's what we're here to do, is to live authentically and abundantly, and to feel free and joyful, and not to be in these spaces of ill health and suffering. So I love you all. I see so many people have joined me today, and I see so many friends. I'd love to say hello to you individually, so just know that I've seen you coming on to the webcast, and I thank you for taking the time for being with me today. And I invite you to look for opportunities so that we can play together more. So have a wonderful day. We've got 73 degrees here in Pennsylvania, so I'm going to go hang outside and just enjoy the day. I'm just sending you lots of love. So take care, be well, and I'll be back soon. Take care.